This is a review of Orville Season 1, Episode 6, The Krill. In this episode, I did enjoy it a lot. I enjoyed the humor, and I enjoyed the episode overall. I did feel like the humor was a little too slapstick for my taste, given the context of the episode. It seemed like they should have been just a little bit more serious about it. These are some very violent things that are going on in this episode, and I would have preferred it just a little more on the drama side and a little less on the slapstick comedy. In particular, a lot of the humor came from the fact that when they were on the Krill ship in disguise, supposedly trying to hide who they were, they constantly spoke in a facetious tone, in a very casual, slangy tone, and it just sounded like, really, that's how you're gonna go there? Everybody else was speaking in a very portentous way, the way that you would expect in a story about high drama, or that you would expect on a military vessel. And they're just kind of goofing off like they aren't in this life and death situation, and I thought that was a little bit, not weird, because I understood why the producers were doing it. They were doing it for humorous effect, but I didn't like it in this case. To me, this kind of detracted from my belief in the danger, and it kind of detracted from my enjoyment of the episode overall. On the other hand, the humor that I did really like was the kind of poking fun at the genre itself without quite breaking the fourth wall. For instance, when they had realized that they had forgotten to name themselves Krill names, and they start making fun of what kind of names are used in science fiction, and it's all the cliches about science fictional names. That was really funny. Overall, however, by the end of the episode, it seemed like the balance between comedy and drama tipped into the favor of drama, because what the plot is that they are sent onto this ship on not exactly a peace mission, but a mission that is not itself actually meant to harm anybody. But then they find out that the Krill are planning to cause a lot of damage on a colony, potentially killing 100,000 people. So they can't let that happen. In order to do that, they have to attack the Krill crew first. Here's where the spoilers come, so if you don't want spoilers, cut out now. They find out that there are a whole bunch of children on board the ship. Now, they're willing to kill the adults to save the people on the colony, but they really don't want to kill children. So they came up with this plan to save the children and yet kill all their, I thought it would be their parents and their families on the ship with them. In fact, when I saw the children, I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. Their ship, their entire society is so devoted to the military that they simply don't separate civilians from combatants. And that actually also kind of explained why they didn't see anything wrong whatsoever with attacking an unarmed colony of families down on the planet that they were planning to attack. Although the other reason, of course, is that they were shown to be adherents of this fanatic religion in which all other species were considered to be soulless and less than fully sentient. Here's where the theme becomes interesting too, because we've introduced a villain for this series and they're religious fanatics. This actually made me wonder about the villains in Discovery as well, which I've stopped watching, so I don't know if they've moved on from the initial episodes. But in those first two episodes in the pilot, the Klingons were also shown as religious fanatics. The writers said in their promo material that they're supposed to represent Trump supporters, which was like weird. But watching this, I wondered if they were actually just too cowardly to admit what they were actually trying to portray, and they just didn't want to say it's a metaphor for a certain conflict with a certain kind of group in current events that is, shall we say, very fanatic in a certain faith. And I wondered the same thing watching this show. Here we have these people who are completely devoted to their god, and then there was all these jokes made about their god. And of course, you could never make any kind of jokes like this or make fun of any group of people for their religious faith, no matter how badly they behave in the pursuit of that faith in our current politics, because that would be very insulting and politically incorrect, and it would stereotype people, etc., blah, blah, blah. And you don't actually want to necessarily use fiction to rouse up hatred towards real-life groups, and yet you want to be able to discuss current events in a metaphorical way so that people can think about these different situations free of the actual real-life examples that may come to mind. This is, as I've said in other videos, one of the really important purposes of science fiction and fantasy is to free our minds to think about problems that we're having, but in a way that kind of loosens us and unmoors us from some of the prejudices and actual situations that we're in, so we can come at it from a completely different angle, from a creative angle. What we see in this is that they showed the Krill religion as being just about as awful as you could show on a comedy television show without sliding into something so gruesome and disgusting that nobody would want to see it in that time slot. They take a human head and they stab it, and that's their religious ceremony. And they do it in this room that looks very much like a chapel in front of their holy book. And so you're thinking, oh my gosh, how can people whose view of humans is that they deserve to be beheaded and then stabbed in the brain ritually in their religious service, how can we ever make peace with this group? And yet at the same time that that it is showing that conundrum as a very real problem. It doesn't show the individual Krill as necessarily all bad. There's a specific character who shows the good side of the Krill people. She's the teacher of the children, and she's also lost a brother in the ship that they earlier destroyed. She's also the character who delivers a very chilling line at the end of the story, after they've gone through all this trouble to save the children, but from the problem that they caused. I mean, they did attack the ship to save the lives of the colonists. She asked them to explain themselves, why did you save those children's lives? And they say, children were not our enemies. And she delivers this very chilling warning. She says, well, they will be. And unfortunately, it's so believable because they saw all these people murdered by the Union, and of course they would grow up thirsting for revenge, and saving their lives isn't going to make them feel grateful from the people who murdered the other adults around them, especially if those adults were their family members. So I like it when shows don't necessarily take the easy way out, that they show the complexity of a situation, even at the same time that, of course, they simplify a situation because they're simplifying it into a metaphor, a analogy, a storyline, a fiction, and yet the complexity is brought in there by not making it too easy to get out, too easy to escape the moral conundrums that that kind of situation brings in. The other thing that this episode showed is that there is continuity, even though most of the storylines up until this point have been episodic, much more episodic than a lot of television than we see these days. One of the funny lines was in an unfunny situation, but with this bit of humor actually did seem appropriate to me. One of the humans is discovered and captured by the Krill, and he's stabbed in the leg, and he shouts out, "That's a brand new leg!" And it's a callback to the previous episode where there was a prank war, and he actually had to regrow his leg. And I loved that they didn't act like that other thing hadn't happened. That was definitely one of the problems with the first series of Trek, and with older television shows in general, is that the characters never seem to grow. In fact, they never even seem to acknowledge the events that had happened earlier in episodes of the series. And I think that we can have a more episodic kind of storytelling without going back to that old sort of weekly amnesia scenario that we used to have in earlier television. I honestly don't know why that was ever a thing in television. Like, did they think the audiences were too stupid to remember what had happened last week? That just seems really weird. But definitely we don't assume that audiences today would have that same approach. Anyway, overall I enjoyed the episode a lot, and I think that we will be seeing more about the Krill. They've also continued that storyline with little references and hints throughout all the episodes leading up to this, and I'm sure that we're going to see more about it in the future, possibly even a full outbreak of war, since the Krill are going around trying to attack various bases and colonies all the time. It's really hard to see how they're going to avoid war. That'll be interesting to see how they handle it in a show that is episodic and is still, in many ways, primarily a comedy, but not just a comedy. As always, share your thoughts with me. What do you think in the comments? If there's any interesting comments, I'll try and respond to them in future videos as well. If you have a channel that you think I'd be interested in, you can tell me about it, but don't leave a link, because I think that those comments that have links get isolated by YouTube and they don't show up with the regular comments. So I'm not exactly sure how that works. I want to be social and everything. I just don't want people's comments to get into a sort of comment jail. I also still don't know why YouTube sometimes demonetizes some of my videos, but then some of my other videos have been remonetized. It's all completely random to me. I really was thinking about that when I watched the episode right after this, Majority Rules, and I hope to put up that review soon as well. Tara out.